Thank all of you very much for being here today. As we all know, this hearing is being held during what continues to be a very precarious time across America's agriculture economy. I would call that an understatement. I would say it's a generational event. While input prices for our producers have been stubbornly high for the past several years, this situation has recently become more acute as farm bankruptcies increase, fuel prices remain high, and interest rates have yet to come down. The cost of fertilizer, the topic of today's hearing, has also gone up, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about the current state of the fertilizer industry, how these high prices directly affect our producers, and what potential solutions exist for Congress to ensure a stable, affordable supply of this important crop input. Again, this is a national security issue. This isn't a simple problem to address, as fertilizer is not a single uniform input. Nitrogen, phosphate, potassium, commonly referred to as NP and K, present a complicated picture of global supply chains that have been affected by the war in Ukraine, trade disputes that have also resulted in countervailing duties, and the recent conflict in the Middle East. Today's hearing is an important opportunity to learn more about how these factors and others directly impact producers' cost. I want to commend the Trump administration for the attention it's given to high fertilizer prices over the last couple of months. The administration has responded by waiving the Jones Act and refocusing the fertilizer product expansion program to ensure projects funded under this program are up and running as soon as possible. In November, U.S. Department of Interior Secretary Doug Burgum also announced the addition of phosphate and potash to the crucial minerals list, which will streamline regulatory hurdles and increase domestic production of these fertilizer inputs. These minerals important to food security, which is national security, were clear, and this was a welcome and much-needed change. U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary Rollins has continued to engage with our producers and brought together her colleagues from across the administration to determine what additional steps they can take to provide relief. Several members of this committee have also proposed legislative solutions to address higher fertilizer prices. And I welcome hearing from our witnesses about those proposals, how they may help, and what additional actions Congress and the administration might take to ensure a reliable and accessible, affordable supply of fertilizer for hardworking American farmers. With our colleagues in the House successfully passing a bipartisan Farm Bill 2.0, I look forward to engaging with the members of this committee on what we learned today to ensure a Senate version addresses the urgent needs of agriculture. Congress owes our nation's producers an updated farm bill that will complement the improvements we made in last year in the One Big Beautiful Bill, and I'm committed to making that happen. While the proposals and solutions we hear about today may help increase production of fertilizer and bring down prices in the long term, in the immediate future, Congress must provide additional assistance to supplement what USDA provided with the farmer bridge payments and the assistance for specialty crop farmers programs to ensure producers have the working capital available to see them through the 2026 crop season. I've been working with my friend Senator Hoeven to advocate for this assistance and appreciate President Trump's acknowledgement of this need when a larger supplemental funding package is requested. Before I turn it over to Ranking Member Klobuchar for opening statement, I ask unanimous consent the statement sent to the committee for this hearing be included in the record, including an op-ed written by USDA Secretary Rollins and a statement submitted to the committee by Deputy Secretary Vaden. Without objection, so ordered. Again, I thank my colleagues and our witnesses for being here today. And with that, I now turn to Ranking Member Klobuchar for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Chairman Bozeman, and thank you for holding this important hearing today and for bringing such distinguished witnesses. In particularly, I would mention the farmers who have come to Washington in the middle of planting season to share their perspectives. So thank you for doing that, including a number from Minnesota. As we hear from our witnesses today, I would say that farmers need policies that encourage new investment, reduce supply disruptions, and improve transparency in the fertilizer market. We know there are many reasons that fertilizer prices are astronomically high. They were high before the war started, but I will note that there is a direct link between recent escalations and this war. In the months since the president started the war with no consultation or authorization from Congress, fertilizer prices, urea has spiked more than 40%. The cost of diesel has hit near record highs in Midwest states. Now, why? Well, nearly half of the global urea goes through the Straits of Hormuz. 30% of ammonia goes through the Straits of Hormuz. Yet even before the war, farmers were walloped by the president's across-the-board tariffs. An analysis by North Dakota State University, found that IEEPA tariffs, you might not like the result. Okay, go Bison, here's what it found, though. Okay, I know, found that IEEPA tariffs added nearly $1 billion in costs to critical inputs like fertilizer, seed, machinery, and chemicals from February through October of last year. I was at the Supreme Court argument, and as you are well aware, the Supreme Court found the tariffs illegal. And last week, the Court of International Trade ruled against the president's authorities to use a different statute for these tariffs. And again, they are not targeted, they are across the board, and it has led to part of these problems. Just last month, I was at a family farm in Cannon Falls, Minnesota, where I met with corn and soybean farmers who are facing escalating costs this planting season. Many of them said stubbornly high fertilizer prices have been an issue for years in a market with little competition. Some of them were able to lock in before the war, not knowing it was going to happen, but others now are even in worse shape. Beyond the geopolitical challenges, there are other reasons. Farmers have just a handful of domestic suppliers to choose from with little transparency about the prices that they ultimately pay. In 2024, just 4 fertilizer companies accounted for 77% of U.S. nitrogen fertilizer sales and all domestic potash and phosphate. That's why I partnered with Senator Thune, who's here with us, and farmers in our states to introduce the Fertilizer Price Transparency Act to create a mandatory price reporting structure at USDA to ensure farmers and co-ops have adequate market information on fertilizer components, especially at times when we see major supply chain shocks. We believe getting this information out there would be very helpful. Aside from price transparency, we need to increase domestic fertilizer production and storage. Senator Marshall, who's also with us, and I have introduced the Homegrown Fertilizer Act to do just that, so we can ease our dependence on imports. And I know Senator Grassley and others on this committee have introduced other pieces of legislation to address these issues. Acting now will ultimately help stabilize prices and give farmers the certainty they need. But it is going to have to be a combination of things. Ending the tariffs or reducing them or making them much more targeted, ending this war, finding a way to resolve it so the Straits of Hormuz is open again, and then going at this long-term systemic problem about the lack of competition in this area. Thank you to our witnesses today.
Thank you. We'll now introduce our witnesses. We're going to go to Senator McConnell first to introduce our witness from Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know how politicians frequently refer to each other as my friend or my good friend? It's usually not true. Frequently, we say that about some of our constituents. I've got a prepared text here. I'm going to ask the chairman to put in the record, but I want to tell you about Eddie Melton. We've been literally friends for decades. We've worked together on issue after issue after issue for a big part of the 42 years I've been here. He's bright as hell and is extremely creative. Example, a year or so ago, he came to me and said, I'm really, really concerned, as I'm sure we all are, about the loss of farmland. Not only did he say he was concerned about it, he had an idea about how to make it less likely to happen, which was to give a tax relief proposal for people who bought a farm if they agreed to continue farming for at least 10 years. I took that idea and put it in the big, beautiful bill. It's law. If Eddie hadn't thought of that, it wouldn't have happened. So I can tell you he's made a difference, not only for Kentucky agriculture, but for agriculture all across the country. And I just wanted to come by, Eddie, and thank you for all you've done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It is my pleasure to welcome Andy Green to the committee today. Mr. Green is a partner in Center Market Strategies, a bipartisan firm dedicated to keeping markets fair and ensuring a seat at the table for businesses of all sizes. He previously served as the first senior advisor for fair and competitive markets at the USDA during the previous administration, where he spearheaded efforts to promote competitive markets across agriculture. In addition, he worked for the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Committee, and started his career in D.C. here in the Senate for Senator Merkley of Oregon. Thank you for joining us today.
Senator Thune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And by the way, thank you for shining a light on this really important subject. I'm glad we're having this hearing. We need to get to the bottom of one of the biggest challenges farmers are facing these days, and that's the cost of inputs, and particularly fertilizer. It's my pleasure, Mr. Chairman, to introduce to the committee Trent Kubik. And he is not only the current president of the South Dakota Corn Growers, but also a farmer and a rancher, along with his wife and parents. They farm near Hamel, South Dakota, raise corn, soybeans, alfalfa, and milo, alongside their cow-calf operation. And by the way, for any of you who've been to South Dakota, in that part of South Dakota, they also have a very, very abundant pheasant supply. But Trent graduated from South Dakota State University with a degree in agronomy. He and his wife, Shannon, have 2 sons. He stays very busy as a certified crop advisor and as a volunteer, FFA and 4-H volunteer, and he's a very active member of his church. And I know also that he is a person, a man of great courage, because he is a diehard Green Bay Packer fan in Viking country, which is a distinction that we share, by the way. But I'm very pleased to have him here today and look forward to hearing a South Dakota perspective on this issue. So, Trent, welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Corey Rosenbusch serves as the Fertilizer Institute's president and CEO, where he's responsible for leading efforts to advance the fertilizer industry. Before joining TFI, Mr. Rosenbusch served as president and CEO for the Global Cold Chain Alliance and worked for the Borlaug Institute. Mr. Rosenbusch holds a degree in international development from Harvard University and a Bachelor of Science degree in agriculture education from Texas A&M. That's a combination. And we appreciate you being here very, very much. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am pleased today to introduce Mr. Joshua Westling, who is here today as a witness before this committee on a very, very important subject. Mr. Westling is leading the development of Project Meadowlark, a new fertilizer plant in Gothenburg, Nebraska. This facility is projected to produce 505,000 tons of liquid fertilizer and reach commercial operation, I'm afraid not until 2029. But before working on Project Meadowlark, Mr. Westling, he led the development and construction of an anhydrous ammonia plant in Geneva, Nebraska, that became one of the few greenfield nitrogen fertilizer facilities built here in this country. Mr. Westling, we are so happy to see you here today, and I look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Green, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Bozeman and Ranking Member Klobuchar, for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. We are here because the American farmer is hurting. For more than 5 years, farmers have endured both price spikes and sustained higher prices, squeezing their margins and affecting their planting choices. It is well known that fertilizer markets are highly concentrated. Indeed, one relatively recent merger created a giant that controls 60% of one type of fertilizer and 30% of the market for another. Amazingly, Federal Trade Commission economists took a victory lap barely 2 years after its completion to say everything's fine. That was a mistake. So what are pillars of building fair, more competitive fertilizer markets? First, enforcement. I'm pleased to see this administration has prioritized investigations in agricultural competition around both agricultural inputs and cattle markets. I hope their efforts yield fruit and would be pleased if they were building on the groundwork laid out previously, for example, with the AgriStats case. High, sustained increases in profits should also be cause for antitrust scrutiny, particularly in light of market shocks that are repeating today. To that end, it may be appropriate to reconsider those recent mergers that have helped form this highly concentrated sector. Effective enforcement of the law also requires funding and staffing at agencies, including USDA. Second, more transparency would be beneficial for a more accountable fertilizer market. Kudos to the bipartisan sponsors of legislation to enhance USDA's role in providing additional transparency, including, in particular, S4152, the Fertilizer Transparency Act of 2026. Public reporting can, and in some cases, can highlight, and in some cases deter, problematic trends. For example, where there's a disconnect between price and underlying supply and demand. In that way, transparency could lead to beneficial outcomes for farmers, even beyond their use of the information itself. I also commend the legislation for its use of modern dashboards, and the bill appropriately preserves the ability for the data to be used for enforcement purposes. Additionally, regular public company disclosure should be preserved and enhanced, as valuable for both investors and for farmers' risk management. Third, investment is an important tool for enhancing competitive markets. The Fertilizer Production Expansion Program, FPEP, was USDA's $900 million commitment to support American-made, sustainable fertilizer capacity in the face of similarly sharply increasing prices and long-term trends towards concentration. Over the course of 3 years, FPEP invested over $778 million in more than 100 projects across 39 states. That adds up to an estimated 12 million tons of new production online and more than 1,500 jobs. More than $100 million remains available to the program, and more via the CCC. Funding for USDA's Rural Cooperative and Business Services and the Agricultural Marketing Service are important for these types of efforts and others that benefit more choices for farmers. Fourth, consumers can support pro-competition incentives upstream for farmers. Clear labels for consumers help producers that actually do the hard work of delivering value-added products that consumers want. In fertilizer, opportunities may exist to align America's desire for healthy food and a clean environment with competition and resiliency in fertilizer. Expanding biofertilizer and nutrient recycling options for farmers should be part of the equation. Fifth and finally, economic research and academic legal analysis are foundational aspects of building and maintaining effective market competition. Government investment in objective, unbiased research, such as the land-grant university system, helps policymakers identify trends and design interventions to restore market competitiveness. I want to particularly highlight the importance of research into seed resiliency. New varieties can help support more efficient fertilizer choices. To that end, special attention should go to ensuring the maintenance and staffing for the Agricultural Research Service's National Plant Germplasm System to avoid the loss of irreplaceable genetics, including in corn. In conclusion, more can and should be done on a bipartisan basis to enhance competition in the fertilizer sector so that America's farmers can compete based on hard work, smart investments, and nature's abundance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kubik.
Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the Senate Agricultural Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Trent Kubik. I'm a farmer from Hamel, South Dakota, and president of the South Dakota Corn Growers Association. I farm in an area of the country where weather varies much more than normal, and more often than not, we are threatened by lack of rainfall. Due to this, we try and limit the amount of fertilizer we purchase and apply at the start of the year to determine if we need more while the crop is growing, which in turn does not allow us to early book and or prepay all of our fertilizer needs. In the first few months of this year, we were not in a position to book or prepay for any fertilizer, so we expected our costs were going to be higher than normal as we would be purchasing closer to peak demand season. But now we are left with costs nearly doubling. This leads me to ask, what is causing fertilizer to increase in price? Despite the cost of natural gas in the U.S. being relatively cheaper than any fertilizer-producing area in the world, the price of nitrogen fertilizer in the U.S. has continued to rise in concert with prices in areas with higher costing natural gas. A resulting rise in margins for U.S. manufacturers should, in theory, encourage expansion of production and higher capacity utilization for the industry. Instead, market power has allowed manufacturers to maintain higher prices at the expense of the U.S. farmer. In fact, last week, a Bloomberg article showed the recent earning reports indicate record profits for fertilizer companies. When my input price goes up, my profit margin shrinks. And I'll be frank, it's unclear to corn farmers in South Dakota how the opposite is possible for the fertilizer industry. What I do now is that profit increase illustrates an industry that does not have to increase my fertilizer prices, but can do so. In my written testimony, I also included analysis that indicated the use of market power to directly impact fertilizer pricing. An analysis conducted in 2024 illustrated the producer price index measuring the change in price of goods sold both for corn and nitrogen, indicating that nitrogen fertilizer prices nearly precisely tracked increases in corn prices. What is the structure of this marketplace? Over the past 40 years, fewer and fewer fertilizer firms serve the U.S. farmer, due in no small part to industry mergers. By almost any measure, these are highly concentrated markets. In addition, large manufacturers appear to have developed and to own distribution networks. For instance, Nutrien operates the largest direct-to-grower distribution network with distribution points and retail locations. But unfortunately, there's limited publicly available information regarding distributors and wholesalers. It is important to note that vertical integration has not led to the efficiency gains passed on to growers and consumers. Instead, our experience is that the integration has resulted in the largest fertilizer companies locking up and leveraging distribution channels, entrenching their dominant position, and extracting excessive profits from farmers and consumers. Market power allows even the simple act of storing these products to be turned against the farmer. For instance, it is my understanding that the fertilizer manufacturers are able to park barges of product and hold on to inventory. In addition, under a scenario where there are only two market participants, the first market participant could set the price for a barge of fertilizer, with the second following at that price. It is easy to see how this might occur. We also need the ability of manufacturers to exert pressure downstream on wholesalers and retailers to be mitigated. As I've already mentioned, there's not significant amounts of information available to the public about wholesalers. I have heard credible reports of practices that undoubtedly could affect farmers, such as the delay in availability of fertilizer booked by a retailer, but it is difficult to assess what is really happening due to the opaque nature of parts of that supply chain. Two key pieces of legislation would be helpful to begin to provide the type of data needed to assess the use of market output control. The Fertilizer Transparency Act of 2026 would increase the data available to help improve market signals by providing public access to meaningful pricing data and give farmers a tool to help plan for these costs. Ultimately, this legislation will make the market for key farm inputs more transparent and therefore represent a step toward making the market more competitive. It also may help provide data that would aid in analysis of whether market control has been used to limit the supply of fertilizer. We greatly appreciate South Dakota Senator John Thune and Ranking Member Klobuchar for introducing this much-needed step towards market transparency. In addition, the Fertilizer Research Act authorizes a study on fertilizer competition, trends, and pricing. This bill also increases transparency and would provide a much-needed information to better assess the marketplace, including key data such as sectors' capacity utilization rates. And we thank Senate Judiciary Chair Chuck Grassley and Senators Tammy Baldwin for introducing this bill. Simply put, farmers need more competition in this marketplace. We thank the U.S. Department of Ag Deputy Secretary Stephen Vaden for his significant interest in this area and call upon the federal agencies that signed the September 2025 Memorandum of Understanding to take meaningful steps towards solutions to concentration in this subsector. Federal antitrust laws exist for precisely this reason, to promote and sustain competition, the lifeblood of our economy. Increased competition for more participants in the fertilizer manufacturing space is the only thing that can deliver meaningful and durable price relief. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and thank you to Chairman Bozeman and Ranking Member Klobuchar for taking up such a critical issue of fertilizer. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Melton.
Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the Senate Ag Committee. My name is Eddie Melton, and I'm a fifth-generation row crop and beef cattle farmer from Webster County, Kentucky, and I currently serve as president of Kentucky Farm Bureau. It's an honor to be with you today to speak on behalf of the farmers of Kentucky, as well as the 470,000 Kentucky Farm Bureau member families. My family has been farming in Webster County since 1900, when my great-great-grandfather purchased our farm. During my lifetime, I've helped bring in more than 50 years of crops. We typically raise corn, soybeans, canola, wheat, and beef cattle. My business partner, Patrick Howard, and I made a decision last August to not plant wheat and canola due to the increased fertilizer price. This is the kind of decisions the farmers across the country have had to make. This hearing comes at a critical time as we assess the current state of the farm economy and the ongoing challenges facing American agriculture. Today's fertilizer price challenges do not begin with the recent conflict in Iran. While global tensions often draw attention to input markets, prices for fertilizer have been elevated for years. Though the current crisis is not new, disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz have beyond a doubt exacerbated the problem. The shipping disruptions contributed to an increase in the price of nitrogen fertilizer. The unpredictability in the region has led to concerns and about availability, not for just this current crop year, but also for next year as well. Since February, we have seen a 33% rise in anhydrous prices, a 55% rise in urea prices, and a 25% increase in liquid nitrogen. All the while, corn prices have declined from $7 a bushel in 2022 to approximately $4.50 per bushel today. Meanwhile, many farmers are operating with little or no working capital, limiting their ability to manage risk or invest in future production. In the first quarter of 2026, 86 farms have already filed for Chapter 12 bankruptcy, including 25 of those in the southeastern region. Last month, American Farm Bureau Federation conducted a fertilizer availability survey of more than 5,700 farmers and ranchers nationwide. The results highlight significant challenges in fertilizer access. Affordability challenges are especially acute in the South, with roughly 78% of the respondents indicating that they were unable to afford all the fertilizer they need. In my home state of Kentucky, just 29% of farmers were reported to be able to pre-book fertilizer, with almost 72% stating that they could not afford all the fertilizer that they needed this growing season. Addressing these challenges requires both immediate and long-term action. In the near term, greater transparency in the fertilizer market and ensuring farmers have access to the fertilizer they need to get through this growing season is essential. We appreciate the efforts of the administration so far, but we continue to call on the President and Congress to do everything in their power to increase availability of fertilizer and ease the price burdens on farmers this growing season. Over the longer term, the United States must strengthen its domestic fertilizer production capacity. We are grateful to the administration, especially Secretary Rollins and the team at USDA, for the work on this issue. Expanding domestic production would improve supply reliability and help moderate price volatility over time. These challenges facing agriculture today are the result of sustained economic pressure that is reshaping the farm economy. According to the last USDA census, we lost more than 20 million acres of farmland and almost 200,000 farms nationwide. If farm closures and farmland loss and consolidation continue, the long-term structure of American agriculture will begin to change. Ensuring that producers have access to affordable inputs and fair, transparent markets is critical, not only for their operations, but for the long-term stability of American agriculture and national food security. For producers operating on thin margins, there is no flexibility to wait for longer-term solutions. That is why near-term support matters. Congress should act now with additional economic assistance to help farmers manage today's cost pressures, prevent further financial strain, and stabilize operations while longer-term fixes are put in place. Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today as both a farmer and as president of Kentucky Farm Bureau. This committee's work is so important to agriculture and the farm economy to ensure the reliable supply of food, fiber, and fuel for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, and Mr. Rosenbusch.
Thank you, Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, members of the committee. The Fertilizer Institute represents manufacturers, importers, wholesalers, and retailers who serve America's farmers. There are over 500 producers of fertilizer globally, and the United States is one of 3 countries that has more than 20 unique companies producing fertilizer. Half of all the crop yields in the world today are only possible through the use of these crop nutrients. And thank you, farmers, because without farmers, there would be no fertilizer industry. I grew up in a small Texas town where my dad was my FFA advisor, and it was really FFA that broadened my horizons to leave rural America and move to Indonesia, where I spent 3 years helping smallholder farmers. And it was really that experience that shaped my view on agriculture. Whether you farm in Indonesia or in Iowa, farmers are highly exposed to global markets. And fertilizer is one of those global markets, which is not a single product, but they are typically represented by 3 macronutrients: nitrogen, phosphate, and potash, each with its own unique market dynamics. The United States does have significant production of nitrogen and phosphate. And while we do have some potash production, we import over 98%. The U.S. only accounts for 7% of total global fertilizer production, and we are a net importer of fertilizer. Over 90% of all fertilizers applied in the world are actually used outside of the United States. We also have one of the world's most sophisticated logistics systems to enable large-scale delivery of fertilizer. That infrastructure helps support strong competition and options for farmers from both domestic and international suppliers to the market. So please hear this. Fertilizer is a globally traded commodity that is subject to fierce competition in global supply and demand. To understand that supply and demand, we really have to begin with geopolitics, starting with Iran. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz impacted about 34% of globally traded urea, 20% of phosphate, and half of the world's sulfur exports. Iran itself is actually the second largest exporter of urea, with about 12% of the marketplace. 20% of the natural gas is supplied from the region, and natural gas is the feedstock, of course, for all nitrogen fertilizer. But the strait is really only part of the story. There have been 31 ammonia plants in the region that have curtailed production or have been damaged during the conflict. Another 49 plants in India and South Asia were also shuttered due to disruption of their natural gas supply from the region. So even with the strait reopening, we do not know the extent of the damage to those production facilities. These issues really just exacerbated what was already a very tight global supply. China, who is the world's largest producer of fertilizer with about a third of all nitrogen production and 43% of the global phosphate supply, are currently restricting all of their exports. 20 Russian nitrogen plants have been damaged due to Ukrainian drone strikes, and Russia also has implemented an export ban on their fertilizer or restriction. So at the same time, we're also experiencing strong demand for fertilizer. For example, in India, the world's second largest consumer of fertilizer behind China, their federal government procures their fertilizer. They then heavily subsidize it to keep prices low for their farmers. because a significant volume of urea was stranded behind the strait, India recently did another urea tender for 2.5 million metric tons of urea at nearly $1,000 per metric ton. We recognize that this is a very challenging and frustrating time for our farmers that are already experiencing very low crop prices. And that's why we'd like to be a partner to develop solutions. In the interest of time, I'll refer to my written testimony for some of those solutions, but we support policies that bolster domestic supply. Ammonia facilities can take more than 5 years and cost $4 to $5 billion to build, or a decade or more for development of a potash or phosphate mine. We also support transparency. Farmers need a reliable source of data and market information. We have proposed the creation of a crop input economist at USDA that can analyze price information and supply factors to aid farmers in their decision-making. But even with these policy solutions, I want to be clear that fertilizer is a globally traded commodity. So while we cannot directly influence prices, we can produce productive policies to bolster domestic supply that mitigates geopolitical risks for the American farmer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Westling.
Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, members of the committee, thank you, and Senator Fisher, thank you for the introduction. My name is Joshua Westling. I'm the founder and CEO of J. Westling & Company, and I am leading the development of Project Meadowlark, a new domestic fertilizer complex in Gothenburg, Nebraska. I am the only developer of new domestic fertilizer capacity testifying today, and I want to give you a candid view from the front line. 6 years ago, I started working on this project because the fertilizer supply problem in our region was getting worse, and nobody was solving it. Nebraska is consistently one of the largest agricultural markets in the United States, with farm cash receipts approaching $40 billion annually. And we are one of the largest markets for UAN and ATS in the country. Yet local production of nitrogen fertilizer is minimal relative to what we consume. The cost of moving fertilizer to where it is needed and the consequences when it doesn't arrive on time are borne by our farmers. Very often, they are also exposed to supply disruptions thousands of miles away from their operations. Project Meadowlark helps change that. Once it reaches commercial operation in 2029, it will produce 365,000 tons of UAN per year, 140,000 tons of ATS, and 52,000 tons of diesel exhaust fluid. The plant is fully integrated. We produce ammonia as an intermediate, but every pound is converted on-site into products our farmers and truckers actually use. This is the second greenfield nitrogen fertilizer plant I will have developed. When Fortegen came online in 2018, it was one of the only 3 greenfield nitrogen fertilizer plants of meaningful scale built in the United States in over 30 years. Project Meadowlark will be the 4th. My team and I have done this before. The total budget for this project is over $1 billion. We have raised over $50 million in pre-development capital to date, the substantial majority from regional investors, farmer-aligned partners, and members of our community. These are the people who understand the supply problem most directly because they live it every season. They have always believed the federal government should have a role in solving this problem, but they also recognize the government often acts only in response to crises, so they took the initiative. I am honored and humbled by their support. I take very seriously the responsibility of delivering what we say we will deliver. When farmers are putting their own capital into restoring domestic fertilizer production that is essential to our nation's farm and food security, that is rural America trying to tell you something. One challenge unique to fertilizer projects is that so little domestic nitrogen capacity has been built in the United States over the past several decades. Unlike sectors such as power generation or data centers, there are relatively few recent reference projects for institutional investors, lenders, engineers, and contractors to rely upon. As a result, substantially more diligence, engineering work, and development capital are required before large-scale private capital can move with confidence. Early-stage funding, through any number of mechanisms, is one of the biggest areas of opportunity for any capital deployment program you are pursuing. I support the framework announced on April 29th by Secretaries Rollins, Lutnick, and Burgum, Administrator Zeldin, Director Hassett, and others. It is a serious response to a serious problem, and this committee's bipartisan engagement is exactly what this moment requires. If domestic fertilizer production is truly a strategic infrastructure, then we need to finance and permit it like strategic infrastructure. I want to use my remaining time to highlight 3 additional steps that would meaningfully strengthen American farm and food security. First, predictability and execution certainty. If domestic fertilizer capacity is truly a strategic priority, then federal timelines must operate with the urgency that this priority requires. Clear and predictable timelines allow private capital to move faster and strategically important projects to come online sooner. Second, coordination across agencies and programs. Large industrial projects move through multiple federal processes simultaneously. When agencies operate independently, delays compound and timelines stretch unnecessarily. Better coordination would materially accelerate the deployment of private capital into strategically important domestic capacity. Third, urgency. If Congress and the administration believe domestic fertilizer production is critical to American food and national security, then we should act like it. Every year of delay is another planting cycle exposed to fragile supply chains and foreign dependency. Projects like ours are ready to move. The faster strategic federal support becomes real and deployable, the faster new domestic capacity comes online. 3 years from now, the measure of success will not be how many frameworks were announced or how many hearings were held. It will be whether new domestic fertilizer capacity actually came online in the United States. This committee has the opportunity to help ensure that projects like ours move fast enough to matter. I'm grateful for your attention to this issue and for the bipartisan seriousness this committee has brought to the problem. I look forward to your questions, and thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to our round of questions, and I'm going to allow Senator Thune to take my place in the order. We appreciate the fact that even though he is the majority leader, he's one of our most active members.
Thank you.
He hasn't forgotten his roots.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you can count on that. And thank you again for your leadership on this, and Senator Klobuchar for taking on this issue. And I'd be remiss if I know this isn't the subject here, but we need to get E15 done, and it solves a couple of important problems. One of which is demand for corn in this country at a time when we're losing some of our export markets, and secondly, increasing the supply of fuel in this country at a time when gas prices are going up. So as an economic matter, it makes all the sense in the world. So I deviate, and I understand, and thank you for your indulgence on that subject. But I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today and for sharing your thoughts on the impact of fertilizer prices and supply chains on the ag economy. These high input costs, adverse weather conditions, low commodity prices all impact our ag economy, and it's important that Congress continue its work toward long-term solutions that support the entire ag industry. And I am very proud of what we did last summer in the Working Families Tax Cuts to increase reference prices for ARC and PLC, improve crop insurance protection, and update disaster programs. But I will say there remains more to be done. And all of the members of this committee know that rising input costs have been eating into producers' bottom lines over the last several years, particularly, I would add, the price of fertilizer. This steep increase, I should say, would shrink or altogether eliminate any grower's profit margins, even during times of strong commodity prices. So it needs to be addressed. So Mr. Kubik, would you elaborate on how the price you have paid for nitrogen and phosphate fertilizers changed over the last several years, and how those changes have impacted your planting decisions over the last few years?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for that question. I did go back and look from 2020 to 2026, kind of where the trends of fertilizer. I got a little bit of PTSD from 2022, I'll be honest, and I must have blocked that out of my memory because I can't believe we paid that much for fertilizer in 2022. But just for reference, in 2020, my farm paid $355 for a ton of urea. By the time 2022 hit, that price jumped to $830. A little bit of retract in 2023 and 2024 to $400 and $500, $600 range, which at the time doesn't take a sharp pencil to figure out that it's not sustainable and we can't be profitable at those levels. And then when you look at phosphate, so MAP, $435 a ton in 2020, jumped to $1,100 a ton in 2022, and has stayed consistently high. Came off that high of 2022, but stayed in the $700 to $800 range consistently for the last 4 to 5 years. That has changed. So we applied it. We've applied less because of it. And actually in 2025, we did not apply any phosphate on our farm because it just did not make economic sense for us. And we're taking the risk that hopefully in the coming years it'll get cheaper and we can catch up. So we've dealt with this for a long time, and then when we have world events that happen that completely blow that up and really exacerbate the problem, we feel it. So this has been a long-standing problem for a long time.
And it predates current events, but nevertheless, I mean, this is contributing, but this is something that's going back a long ways, and there are some structural things, I think, here that need to be addressed, which is why we have some of these transparency bills. Could you just very quickly share your experience with the recent shortages, in particular, the shortage of nitrogen in South Dakota?
I'll be honest, Senator, we have not experienced a shortage of nitrogen yet.
Okay.
For our spring needs, the nitrogen fertilizer has been there. A lot of this stuff was in place and in country long before the events around the world happened. And so they went up in price significantly, the product that was here. So we do have our product. We're starting to get concerned about what do we do in crop as our crop is growing and needs more fertilizer. And then as we look towards 2027, it's a real concern.
As we know, there are a small number of manufacturers who have the lion's share of domestic fertilizer production. So I would like to ask this question of Mr. Rosenbusch. In the United States, what percentage of sales for potash, nitrogen, and phosphorus, respectively, to U.S. retailers come from manufacturers other than the largest companies?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. Each market is very different, so I'll start with potash. Potash, only about 2% of our domestic manufactured product represents the market here. When you look at nitrogen, again, it depends on each of the different products. Ammonia, we have a large percentage of U.S. domestic producers. We have 18 different companies that make up about 80% of that. And then when you get to phosphate, about 60% of our domestic manufacturers represent the market share in the United States. The other 40% is imported product. So it depends on each of those. And when you think about the total market for the United States, it's not just the domestic produced product, but it's also the imported product that we need to serve all the farmers' needs.
Mr. Chairman, my time has expired, but if I can, I would like to submit a couple of questions for the record. So,
Without objection.
thank you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kubik, in March, Leader Thune and I introduced the bill I mentioned that would create a mandatory price reporting system for price transparency of fertilizer components. Could you talk about how price transparency in the fertilizer market helps farmers like yourself gain insight into the market and can make informed financial decisions? And how is it helpful during the current market volatility we find ourselves in?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. And it would be huge. You know, we just want to understand this market. You know, time and time again, I found myself saying it, my neighbors saying it, that when the price of fertilizer is so high, we keep asking ourselves, why is it so high? You know, what is going on now? This one little event, you know, a couple months ago was easy to point to, but leading up to that, nobody knew that answer. And so we just want transparency in that for risk mitigation. So we can understand how we purchase our fertilizer early, when we do it, the trends, everything else, and just pull back some layers to see how our fertilizer, our main component, one of our main input components, is priced and priced to us.
Thank you. Mr. Green, you spent some time during the last administration looking at competition challenges in fertilizer and other input markets. Can you talk quickly about some of your findings back then?
Well, we did a request for information around fertilizer. I gather your question is focused on fertilizer or not. We did a lot of different things on seeds, on cattle, on poultry, but on fertilizer, we did a request for comments, and we did a summary of that. It was made available, and we really found, this was in 2002, 2003, so many of the trends you're hearing today were entirely present then. These have been building up for a number of years, but they are small number of choices, high concentration, high prices that follow the price of corn rather than the price of the supply of demand for the actual product itself, or supply and demand for the inputs into fertilizer itself. And that really just raises questions. I mean, obviously there are some reasons why it might be connected, but the extent of the connection is really a focus of concern. And so that we made all of that public, hundreds of comments, and would certainly happy to share that with your office.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Melton, you mentioned the war, and many of our farmers have found themselves stuck with higher costs right before the planting season, or during it actually, which was reflected in your Farm Bureau fertilizer survey. 58% of the respondents reported that their financial situation has worsened this year. How are these costs going to affect the next generation of farmers that are trying to get started that maybe don't have the margin or the savings of some of our farmers who've been around a while?
That's we've probably seen 4 years of balance sheet deterioration. We've had 4 years of where prices have declined, and basically all of our inputs have gone up, but especially fertilizer here. It's concerning about the next generation because they probably don't have the balance sheet strength that some of our mature farmers I would say, and it is very concerning. Plus, actually talking a young person into getting into agriculture right now is kind of concerning to me, because what would make you want to do this? I mean, when you're looking at not being able to make a profit, or basically not planting the crops that you normally plant because of fertilizer prices, we have to do something to try to stabilize this market and make us more profitable. Okay. And there's a lot of different things that we can do.
Agreed.
But we have to get farmers back to profitability again.
Agreed. Thank you. Quickly, Mr. Rosenbusch, can you talk more about the unique challenges fertilizer companies are facing with these supply chain disruptions? You mentioned some things internationally that I didn't even know about, and I want to quickly get to Mr. Westling, so if you could be fast. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Klobuchar. I think I would just summarize it by saying that we are competing as a free market in the United States with a significant amount of manufactured fertilizer in countries where you have state-controlled enterprises. I referenced China with almost half of the world's phosphates, and when they decide to keep that all for domestic consumption, that is what is driving market trends more so than any other factor right now, is their internal government policies.
Thank you. And Mr. Westling, thanks for being here. I mentioned Senator Marshall and I introduced the bill to create a grant and loan program at the USDA to help domestic fertilizer companies, getting at some of the concerns that your previous witness mentioned, like yours, to get into financing. What are the challenges in creating a novel fertilizer production facility like Project Meadowlark? Nice name, by the way.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. So the biggest challenges on projects that get to a certain scale are the upfront capital requirements. And in this industry in particular, since so few have been built, as I alluded in my testimony, there's a real lack of expertise around it. And so in the case of our project, for example, we'll have spent $50 to $100 million before we sign some of the major contracts for construction. So that upfront capital cost to bridge to the point where you've got the certainty to be able to execute and give certainty to other investors and lenders, I would say is the biggest challenge for sure.
Thank you very much.
Senator Marshall.
Thank you so much, Chairman and Ranking Member, for your leadership in this as well. Thanks to the Working Family Tax Cuts law, crop insurance and reference prices have been taken care of for the most part, but now input costs are the #1 issue concerning American farmers. In fact, fertilizer costs now account up to 40% of input costs. That is now the #1 issue, these input costs. American farmers are price takers on both ends, paying monopoly prices for inputs they must buy, then accepting commodity prices they cannot control. With no pricing power on either side, that's not a market, it's a trap for the American farmers. I do point out that prices for fertilizer were higher for some 18 months when Russia invaded Ukraine, and those prices came now, but of course now they're up significantly. I'll speak to Mr. Rosenbusch first. As you know, one particular company controls 64% of U.S. phosphate rock mined, and they account for 90% of retail sales to farmers. It's being reported that this largest domestic supplier of phosphate is closing plants, which will reduce domestic supplies, while we have a 16% duty on Moroccan imports on phosphate. So I guess the other question I would ask you, what are these countervailing duties protecting? Aren't farmers now getting squeezed from both sides with less domestic supply and restricted imports?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Marshall, for that question, and really a really interesting topic that I think is going to be the hot topic going forward into the future. I can't speak for a specific company's business decisions, and as you are aware, those are companies that are all TFI members on opposite sides of that case. So we remain neutral when it comes to that specific case.
So I'm not asking you to comment on their plan, but I think you would agree with me that the farmers are getting squeezed on both sides now. less domestic supply and restricted imports. Does the Fertilizer Institute support free market competition in fertilizer pricing? Yes or no? But if the answer is yes, you have to justify the duties that block the world's largest phosphate producer from competing for Americans' farmers' business.
There's no question, Senator, that farmers are going through a really difficult economic time, and TFI does support policies that promote open, fair, predictable, and transparent trading environment. I think when we think about phosphate going forward, those two raw materials to manufacture that are sulfuric acid and ammonia. With the sulfur challenges, we are now seeing...
Yeah, we understand all that. We understand there's a shortage of sulfur. We need the sulfur to mine the phosphate. That's pretty elementary chemistry. I'm just going to ask you directly. Does the Fertilizer Institute support or oppose removing the 16% countervailing duties on Moroccan phosphate? The farmers in Kansas deserve an answer.
Senator, I understand how challenging that is for farmers because we have member companies that are both on both sides of that case. We do not take a position on that particular case at the ITC right now.
The American farmers paid almost $7 billion in excess costs over 5 years because of that 16% countervailing duty. Does the Fertilizer Institute believe American farmers should pay above market prices to protect a single company's market position?
Senator, we definitely believe that farmers need access, and TFI member companies are committed to ensuring they have supply, and that supply is in line with what global markets are. In many cases, we have seen that the U.S. market is actually traded at a bit of a discount right now, almost $100, $150 cheaper than what Brazil pays for their phosphates. And that commitment that I think the U.S. fertilizer suppliers have is to the farmer to get an affordable and abundant supply of fertilizer.
Rosenbusch, would you agree that the American farmers deserve access to the lowest cost, highest quality fertilizers available, regardless of where it's produced?
Thank you, Senator. We 100% agree that fertilizer manufactured and bolstering domestic supply of fertilizer is incredibly important to deliver to U.S. growers the fertilizer they need in order to be profitable.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that the number one challenge for the American farmer today is input cost, and fertilizers now account for up to 40% of those input costs. Look, trade exports are up. We went from 2.3 to 2.8 billion bushels of corn last year. We're going to have a 20% increase in corn and ethanol exports again this year. The problem are the input costs, and the fertilizer is the biggest chunk of those that we need to address. And I appreciate, again, the chairman and ranking member for giving us this opportunity to discuss these. We've been working on these, again, since Russia invaded Ukraine, and we need to give the American farmers some relief now. Getting rid of those countervailing duties would be the quickest, most immediate impact that the American farmer could see in the real world today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member, and thanks to all of our panelists today. I want to actually maybe follow up a little bit on Senator Marshall's questions because I think he's touching on something that everyone on this committee cares about. So you've got these skyrocketing input costs, and we also have what we know to be really significant market concentration on the input side. We're talking about fertilizer today, and I think actually, Mr. Kubik, you put it really clearly. You said basically the fertilizer companies raise their prices because they can, and that's the market power that they have. And you know, I was just looking at some data which gets at this, and I'm going to just come to you first, Mr. Kubik, because I think this is really interesting. Now, this data is a few years old, so it's maybe prices that were, you know, global markets that were more affected by what's going on in Ukraine, but I would ask everyone, do we really think it's different now than it was? This is from the Institute of Ag and Trade Policy in Minnesota. So they said that in the 21-22 time period, the 9 largest fertilizer companies made an estimated $84 billion in profits. In 2022, major fertilizer companies saw profits increase by somewhere between 100 and 200%. Their input costs did not go up by that much. So think about that, Mr. Kubik. Their profits are going up between 100 and 200%. How much do you think the profits of the average farmer in South Dakota was going up during that time period?
Thank you for that question, Senator, and bringing light to it. I can tell you personally,
Yeah.
they have not gone up by 100 or 200%. And that's how we struggle with it.
Right.
You know, the cost of production. I look at my cost of production when I look at marketing my corn or my soybeans or my cattle, and that's how I determine my marketing points. And that's what we kind of feel taken advantage of. They can look at their cost of production and throw it out the window and just look at a price to set it at.
That's the price that they can charge because, as you said, they have the market power. Mosaic's profits in that time period went up 120%. Nutrien's profits went up 142%. So, I mean, that looks like excess profit to me. Did you want to add?
If I may, and I believe that there's a copy of the article at all of your desks. So, I mean, this isn't just 2 and 3 and 4 years ago. This is like in the last week. We've seen similar reports of massive profits, and that's the thing that we feel the worst about is during this the last 75 days, a lot of money was being made, but it wasn't by farmers.
That's I always say when I'm talking to Minnesota farmers, there's plenty of money in agriculture. The question is who's getting it, and it's not farmers right now. Now, I'm fully in support of the excellent transparency laws, the bills that have been put forward, bipartisan by my colleagues. I'm wondering, Mr. Melton or Mr. Kubik, anybody want to comment on, do you think that those transparency laws, if they were in place right now, do you think that would change the behavior of these companies? Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the behavior that they have of being able to raise prices so exorbitantly.
Well, thank you, Senator. I think we need all the tools in the toolbox that we can use. Anything that we can do to help us get back to profitability. I go back to, we've seen 4 years of decline in our balance sheets. This can't continue on. You can't keep losing money and continue with the things that we're doing. So I think we need every tool in the toolbox that we can use. I think transparency in markets will give us one tool there that we can use. What we do right now, and I talked to my partner this morning about it, we get a lot of our information from the retailer. That's where we get our information on fertilizer right now. I mean, there are things on the internet you can go look to, but actual fertilizer pricing,
to be able to actually see.
You need to go to we have to go to the retailer right now to see where we can price that fertilizer. So I think it would be a good tool in the toolbox.
Mr. Green, would you like to comment on this issue that I've raised about the exorbitant profits that we're seeing? I know you work a lot on the question of how we can have fair markets in agriculture to the benefit of the folks that are actually growing things.
I mean, I want to agree with my colleagues here that you need a lot of toolkits. There's no one toolkit that will bring those down. When you do have those supernormal profits, you need to go back and look at the mergers and look at the other conduct and bring enforcement cases. You have to think about the transparency toolkit. You have to think about the investment toolkit of supporting the new competition, the new choices, which is what we did in the previous administration, $778 million of investments. And so every single one of those is part of bringing down those supernormal profits, which are indication of a broken market.
That's exactly right. I agree with that completely. I know my time is up, Mr. Chair. I think the question is, what can we do to change the behavior of companies that are in a position where they can charge such high prices and get such exorbitant profits? I mean, in some sectors, we look at things, I know it'd be radical, but things like a windfall profits tax, something to change the behavior so that we can make the market more fair, particularly for the folks that are doing the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Grassley.
Before I ask Mr. Kubik the first question, I want people to know that there's at least one other senator agrees with the questioning that Senator Marshall put forward. In 2021, countervailing duties were first applied to Moroccan phosphate. A study published at Texas A&M in January found that farmers paid nearly $7 billion in additional costs between 21 and 25 growing seasons because of countervailing duties. One company, Mosaic, has 80% of the market in the United States, yet they feel like they need protection from 18 tariffs on Morocco phosphate coming into this country. Trump has tried to help with dollars from the U.S. Treasury, but what I hear even last week in 12 different counties in Iowa that I toured, farmers want to get their money from the marketplace, not from the U.S. Treasury. So I think this administration ought to get rid of that 18% tariff on Morocco phosphate. Lowering production costs would be as much help as increasing prices for farmers or getting money for the federal treasury. Now, Mr. Kubik, for many years now, farmers have felt that when commodity prices increase, input prices are bound to increase with them. Since 2020, even as price of corn has decreased, fertilizer prices have remained elevated. We know the talking points of the fertilizer industry. The cause would be the Ukraine, Chinese export controls on fertilizers, all contributing to prices farmers are facing, and increased prices those are. However, farmers have also been seen increased consolidation of the fertilizer industry. So farmers want to know exactly why they're paying the price that they have for fertilizers. And I think we need more transparency on that. So for you, Mr. Kubik, as a consumer of fertilizer, how much insight do you have into the price of the fertilizer you use?
Yeah, thank you for this question, Senator. And I'll echo what Eddie said. Is we get a lot of that from our retailer, and our retailer gets a lot of that from the wholesaler, and we're just kind of going off of things we hear in the news, and then coming to them. That's why we're so big on the fertilizer transparency, the Fertilizer Research Act that you introduced. We just need to see more data and see more trends. We like to typically purchase our fertilizer in the summer prior to the growing season. So this summer, a lot of farmers will be purchasing fertilizer in June and July for the next growing season. But now we have a lot of uncertainty. Is that trend going to remain the same? We just don't have a lot of that data to look at. So if we can just see a lot more of that, even if it's too high and we think it's too high, at least we know how and why and predict a little more what it's going to do.
So my second question, I think you just addressed, but more transparency and knowledge and data on fertilizer prices would be very beneficial to you.
It'd be huge. Yep. As one piece, as mentioned before, as one piece of the puzzle trying to figure out this market.
Yeah. Maybe this next question is difficult for you to answer, but is there any reason you can think of that the fertilizer industry may not want a study to be published by the U.S. Department of Agriculture?
Not one that I can think of, and actually, heard comments today. They're very supportive of transparency, which is nice to hear that they support that. So it sounds like, with their support and our support, hopefully we can get these bills across the finish line and start getting and collecting this data.
Mr. Rosenbusch, does the Fertilizer Institute support a report that provides insight to farmers on why they have paid certain prices for fertilizers, including factors such as market concentration?
Senator Grassley, thank you for that question. Good to see you again. We had some of these conversations a few months ago when you chaired the committee. And yes, we do support transparency. We think farmers need more information to understand markets, prices, and we believe that USDA can play a very important role in being able to explain that. I was at a farm on Friday talking to some growers about the dynamics, the global dynamics, what was creating the price structure we have today, and they were very appreciative of that. But I'm one person, and I think the more we can do to invest in providing that market information, the better it will be for growers to make those decisions.
Okay. My time's up, Mr. Chairman. I'll put the rest of my questions for answer in writing.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member for calling this hearing. To all the panelists, thank you all for being here. Last week, I had the opportunity to sit down with some farmers and ranchers in southern New Mexico and just ask them what's working, what's not working, what's happening to your bottom lines. A host of issues they shared with me, increased farm input costs, shortage of farm labor, concern with an aging farming population, loss of expertise at USDA. Someone said that it's hindering their ability to get timely assistance from the United States Department of Agriculture. Now, many of the issues are larger than one administration. I recognize that. However, some of the issues can be directly attributed to policies advanced by this president and by this administration. President Trump began by implementing sweeping tariffs that have closed off entire markets to American farmers. Markets and relationships that we spent decades building, driving down prices just as farmers across the country headed to the field to harvest their crops. Now, President Trump then started a war in Iran. I would argue an illegal war, without seeking congressional approval. As a result, the Strait of Hormuz is now closed, which has caused fertilizer prices around the world to skyrocket. While all of this was happening, President Trump's Department of Agriculture implemented sweeping reduction in force efforts. It's hard to find inspectors anymore to go in if you're able to get approval or a stamp to sell your stuff. And we can't seem to agree to empower colleges across the country that are ag institutions that when there's not a USDA inspector available, there should be someone from the state available, whether they're going to look at crop yields or they're going to look at what's happened with drought for insurance, or we're just going to get a stamp so that they can sell their products. I really don't understand that. Now, with the loss in institutional knowledge and talent at the agency, it creates more of a backlog on top of all the pressures that I was just sharing. So, Mr. Rosenbusch, a yes or no question. Let me just start with this one. Yes or no, is President Trump's war in Iran directly related to the spike in fertilizer prices we've seen since February of 2006?
Senator, thank you for that question. And we have seen significant impact on the global fertilizer markets because of the events in Iran. There are many factors right now that are at play on a global scale that are really driving what these markets are, whether that be what India is doing with their purchasing power right now or what China is doing to restrict exports.
I'm not a lawyer, but is that a yes?
Senator,
All right, if you're not going to say yes or no, I'll just point to the first bullet on your file testimony. The answer is yes, and you justify it in the first bullet on page 10 of your testimony. It's not a gotcha question. It's just, what's hard around Congress these days is stipulating to a set of facts. You bring yours, I bring mine, and then we fight about them, and there's no facts. What this war in Iran is doing, the cost of fertilizer is bullshit. Maybe we should just be talking about the kind of fertilizer that comes out of cows and sheep, and maybe we should be using some more of that in America or figure it out. But you all don't come in here and tell me that the people back home are full of shit. I don't understand that, man. The cost is the cost. Implements are more expensive because of tariffs. I'm not going to ask the Republican witnesses that because I'm going to get some academic justification on why it's just my imagination. When I went to put diesel this weekend, I guess it was just my imagination that I was paying over $5.50 a gallon. I'm one of the few senators here that probably puts diesel in a truck and a tractor. I have a lot of questions to file, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I got distracted here. We just want a straight answer, man. Farmers and ranchers across the country are hurting. You know this. Whether it's a Democrat or Republican, whenever an administration is doing something that's punitive to the folks that we have a responsibility to fight for, let's speak up. I'll call out Dem presidents the same way I'm going to call out a Republican president. I grew up as a self-sustenance farmer. I don't know we were poor when I was growing up because we always had good food. Got a lamb chop, fresh chili, tomatoes, apples. Sometimes Mom even made an apple pie. I'm still one of the senators that shakes the milk when I buy it because we had milk delivered when I was a kid, and it's the way that you got the cream from the top into the rest of the milk. My buddies laugh at me. They say, what the hell am I doing? I'm sorry for the vernacular that I'm using, Mr. Chairman, but sometimes when you grow up on a little farm and you have to shovel shit in the morning to keep the barns clean, we need to talk that way over here so we can connect. We can do better here, and I certainly hope that we can get a farm bill, that we can work together, that we don't let basic arithmetic get in the way of what it means because it takes 60 votes to get it done. Let's work together to get things done here. And all that I would ask for the panelists, whether we meet individually or not, let's just be straight with each other, y'all. We don't need to sugarcoat stuff. People are hurting today. Let's recognize that, and then let's agree to find some solutions to make things better. Thank you for the indulgence.
Thank you. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Westling, can you take just a minute to discuss the project that you are doing in Gothenburg and maybe highlight some of the challenges that you face?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Fisher, for the question. So the project that we're doing is to make a fertilizer type that's utilized in that region or geography in the state of Nebraska, born from the shortage that exists there and the difficulty of transporting product there over sometimes huge distances. In terms of the challenges we faced, like every large project that's not done by an incumbent or somebody with a big balance sheet, it's upfront capital and raising capital to get those projects off the ground. And so fortunate and thankful for the mostly farmers who stepped up to the plate to fund this project or to fund the early stages of the project.
You know, we're hearing some discussions around federal investments. So what types of safeguards do you believe should be put into place to ensure that new infrastructure projects that happen, that they're not going to be resold, which Senator McConnell talked about, that he was able to work on, or contribute to consolidation, which is what I hear from producers. I'm sure you do out in the western part of the state too, hear from producers. They're worried about that consolidation and what it does to price. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, Senator Fisher, I'm certainly not an attorney, and I won't pretend to know how to write bills. I'll leave that to all of you much smarter than I am. But I would like to think that there is a way through whatever form potential assistance comes in for you to be able to create those exclusions or prohibitions from trading or consolidating or putting these types of projects in the hands of whomever you don't wish for them to be in.
Do you worry about regulations? Federal regulations, local regulations. Have you had to deal with any of that?
Senator Fisher, we have had some regulations that we've had to deal with, not indifferent from most projects of this scale. We've been relatively fortunate in that in our state, the folks who are in charge of administering those regulations or enforcing those regulations have all been very reasonable to work with.
Good.
And to the extent at the federal level where we needed them to weigh in, again, blessed by the fact that those folks have all been very reasonable to work with as well.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Mr. Rosenbusch, as many of my colleagues have shared, fertilizer availability and the prices are at the forefront of every farmer's mind across the country, and that includes my friends in Nebraska. For years, the United States has been reliant on foreign fertilizer production to meet that domestic demand. With a lot of talk around the need to increase that domestic production, can you share the current regulatory challenges existing companies face when they tried to onboard a new fertilizer facility in the U.S.?
Yeah, thanks, Senator, for that question. And, Josh did an outstanding job of explaining that in his time.
Do you feel that it's pretty good to be able to deal with?
It is really hard to build new capacity in this country. One recent ammonia plant took 7 years to permit and over $25 million just to permit it, not even to start construction. We're talking $4 to $5 billion of capital. A phosphate mine took over a decade and $32 million just to permit. And that's all about the federal permitting process across multiple agencies. When you think about actual production itself, once you get into production, the regulatory challenges that add costs to manufacturing. You've got phosphogypsum, which is a byproduct of phosphate fertilizer that has to be stacked and costs over $1 billion a year just to maintain those stacks. There are a long list of regulations that we would be happy to share with you of things that can be done to help bolster domestic supply.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Kubik, so nice to see you here. Can you take a minute to discuss the role that precision agriculture has, that new technology that's out there, and the increased approval we're seeing in the bio-based products that they can have in providing additional options to growers, to ag producers that are faced with the uncertainty they have now with fertilizer?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for that question. This is something I'm very, very passionate about.
Me
Coming,
too.
yeah, coming out of college with an agronomy degree and always looking to better ourselves. And I think that could be said for all farmers. We're all trying to do what's best for the land because we want our kids and our grandkids to farm on that land. And this fertilizer costs a lot, so we can't just throw it on and waste it and kind of hope it got there right. So we're very precisely applying it. We're variable rate applying it. So parts of the field are getting more than others based on our soil testing to make sure we're doing everything exactly like we should. The biological space has definitely garnered a lot of attention over the past couple of years with the increase in fertilizer. I'll be trying a couple different ones on my farm. I have tested multiple different ones on our farm. The problem with that, unfortunately, those senators, we live in reality, and they're not enough right now to rely on. We still need fertilizer to grow our crops, and we're hopeful. I dream of a day where I don't need commercial fertilizer anymore. That'd be the best thing ever. But I don't know if my grandkids will experience that. But if we can put on less, put it on accurately, I think it does good for both sides.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warnock.
Thank you very much, Brother Chair. Brother Chair, I'm sure you know that the top state for farm bankruptcies last year was your home state of Arkansas. The number 2 state was Georgia. So we're dealing with this same issue. And I'm sure the chair and I agree that while we like to see our states leading, we don't want to be leading in this way. In fact, farm bankruptcies increased by 46% last year due largely to the president's trade war. And I wonder how many more farmers may go bankrupt by the end of this year because of President Trump's war in Iran. A war that is raising fertilizer and fuel costs, as we all know, due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which anyone paying attention could have predicted. Mr. Rosenbusch, the president's war in Iran has further increased fertilizer prices for farmers in the United States. You're the CEO of the Fertilizer Institute, the trade association representing the companies that provide farmers with fertilizer. Has the White House presented you with a viable plan for bringing down fertilizer prices this year?
Senator, thank you for that question. And we have been very engaged with discussions on Capitol Hill with the administration on really an all-government approach to solutions to help mitigate the impacts of the closure of the Strait, what we can do to prioritize domestic supply, what we can do to incentivize projects like Josh's to bolster more domestic supply so these supply shocks will not hurt the farmer in the future when we're so reliant on some of these foreign supply sources around the world.
Do you expect fertilizer prices to go down this year?
Senator, that's a really interesting question. I don't know that I can comment or legally predict what's going to happen with the price of fertilizer, but I will tell you that we're very concerned about particularly phosphate with $1,000 plus sulfur right now due to the restriction of sulfur coming through the Strait. We're now at a point where sulfur costs alone are significantly higher than the cost of phosphate. And so you've seen around the world right now, phosphate mines around the world starting to curtail production because of some of that price impact.
Yeah. Same question for the rest of the panel. Has anyone seen a viable plan from the White House that gives them confidence that fertilizer prices will decrease in the near term? No takers. So fertilizer prices are increasing. Diesel costs have also increased by over $2 a gallon compared to this time last year, and there's no end in sight. Mr. Melton, you're the president of the Kentucky Farm Bureau, so you know farmers in the South typically don't pre-purchase their fertilizer and are more subject to price volatility. What are you hearing from your members? Are they able to afford fertilizer this planting season?
So in Kentucky, we got an early start this year, and most of the crop has already been planted this year in Kentucky, Senator. But I can tell you that, and especially on our farm, we did more intensive soil testing and applying fertilizer where we had to without trying to reduce yields. I think that's across the South. I think a lot of people are doing those things trying to get more creative to where we can try to pencil out a profit with where current prices are for our commodities.
So, so people are feeling the affordability pinch, obviously, right?
People are cutting back usage on fertilizer on their farms. Yes, sir.
So dealing with the uncertainty as best they can. This uncertainty hits farmers at the worst possible time, planting season. It's not a good time to be dealing with this. And I'm not hearing from anyone here that the White House has a plan that will solve this crisis for farmers. Dialogue is one thing, a plan is another. And at this point, the best case scenario for farmers is the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before the war started. But even then, the fertilizer market will not bounce back overnight. If it were to open tomorrow, you'll still be dealing with these prices. And so between the war in Iran, spiking fuel and fertilizer prices, and illegal trade wars increasing the cost of equipment and limiting market access, it's no wonder that farmers in Georgia I talk to say that they can't take much more, and we're dealing with this farm foreclosure crisis. As a member of this committee, I'll continue to fight for farmers and doing everything I can to end this illegal war in Iran and unfreeze our fertilizer and fuel markets. Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hovind.
So recently I had an opportunity to get together with Secretary Rollins as well as our chairman, Senator Boozman, and talk about both short-term and long-term efforts to reduce fertilizer prices. One of the ways we're doing that is with precision agriculture. And as a matter of fact, Brian Carroll is here with us today from Grand Farm in the audience, along with Greg Tavine. And Grand Farm in North Dakota was recently named as the manager for the National Proving Grounds and the actual first proving ground or test site for ag technology to develop precision ag in a way that helps us actually accomplish the same by using less inputs, meaning less chemical, less fertilizer for our crops. And so that's exactly the kind of work Grand Farm is doing in conjunction with ARS and North Dakota State University and NIFA funding. And that has an impact both in the short term and the long term because basically you get the same result with less fertilizer. So I would like to hear from both Mr. Kubik and Mr. Melton on how that can make a difference for farmers and what kind of things need to happen so that farmers can utilize that technology both now and in the future. Starting with you, Mr. Kubik.
Well, thank you, Senator, for that question. I think in terms of what can do, a lot of farmers are already using it, especially in fertilizer application. Many of us get our fertilizer applied by our retailer, and those retailers are using state-of-the-art machines. They're using, again, like I said, variable rate technology, and it is all a goal of ours to use less fertilizer or to maximize the efficiency of our fertilizer use. Something my farm did last year, where we learned we can lower, with a little bit of rain, we can lower the amount of nitrogen we need to grow a bushel of corn, and I think that's key. I don't know if we're necessarily using on whole a lot less nitrogen. We're just more precisely placing it where it needs to be. But ultimately, that is our goal, and a lot of that equipment and precision technology is in the field today.
Mr. Melton.
Well, thank you, Senator. I think research and development is probably one thing, and you brought up your university. I think our university does an outstanding job of doing research on projects like they're talking about in your state. So I think that we have to continue to do research and development into these technologies. And while I'm thankful that I have some younger folks on my farm that can help apply these technologies, because some days I have trouble starting a tractor sometimes now, but I'm thankful that we do have the research and development from the universities that and the land grants that can do these projects and work on technologies that can be brought to us to where we can get more efficient into the future.
Yeah, well, Mr. Melton, you may have a little trouble with some of the new technology, but they like the fact that your labor, and they probably don't have to pay too much for it. I'm guessing you volunteer.
I volunteer. No, I don't volunteer, but they do tell me sometimes when I'm there, I think some of the jobs I get aren't the most prestigious jobs anymore.
Yeah, it's good you do it. Mr. Westling, in North Dakota, we also have Dakota Gasification Company that now takes coal, converts it to natural gas, and then converts it to fertilizers like ammonia and urea. How do we get more of that going so we get our fertilizer here at home and we have more competition and lower prices rather than getting it from Indonesia or Russia or someplace where it's high priced and a lot of transportation costs.
Yeah, I think the question was asked earlier about the plan from whomever, be it the White House or the USDA or whichever agency wants to take it on. And maybe I'm just simple, but I think the plan in my brain is if the demand is going to be there, and it is, increase some supply, right? Because that should lower the costs.
Demand's there.
The demand is there. And so I think some of the ideas that I alluded to earlier with incentivizing these projects on the front side of on the front end of this process, helping bring capital to bring additional certainty, certainly when the government leans in, everybody else leans into, those types of things could and should incentivize folks to build more of these projects, no doubt.
And you would agree we need to do more of it?
I absolutely agree we need more of them. The farmers who've invested in my project do as well.
Yeah, and we appreciate your project as well in Nebraska. Mr. Rosenbusch, what do we do in the short term to get more competition and fertilizer prices down?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And it's an excellent question. It's really difficult right now when you've got countries all over the world that are driving up the price by subsidizing and paying high prices. I do agree with Mr. Westling. The administration has done some things to incentivize bolstering domestic supply, and we need that, whether it's permitting reform. Some of the equipment that's required to build plants, such as his in Nebraska, has to be imported. And so there's currently tariffs on some of that product or some of those pieces of equipment that have to come in, driving up the cost of construction. And then, the little things like hours of service exemptions to make sure that we can get fertilizer delivered, prioritizing fertilizer for domestic supply, which is also on the back of delaying some of the plant turnarounds to make sure we're optimizing supply coming out of the existing plants.
Thank you.
Senator Welsh.
Thank you very much for this excellent hearing. And I just want to compliment the witnesses. It's very instructive, and I appreciate the information you're providing to us. We are in a crisis in American agriculture. I mean, there is an immense amount of wealth that is being created by the farmers. They're just not getting any. And let me just illustrate that point by a report from our department. The average loss for rice is $220 an acre. For cotton, $202 an acre. For oats, $159 an acre. For peanuts, $131 an acre. For sorghum, $91 an acre. For corn, $87 an acre. I mean, this is not sustainable. So doing some of the things that Governor Hoeven was talking about, precision agriculture, things that are within the control of the farmer, they're doing that every single day and figuring out ways to do it. But if we have this inability to do any control over what the input costs are, and they march up step by step as the price of corn goes up or the price of oats goes up, the farmer is totally at the mercy of a market that is consolidated. Mr. Kubik, you talked about consolidation, and I was impressed, all of you really, at how long and how specific you are. But that is an issue that we've got to deal with. You can deal with precision agriculture and try to figure out the best practices, and you've got your own your incentive to spend as little as possible. But what about consolidation, where it would take some federal action to deal with the impact of consolidation? You see that as a real impact on your pricing, right?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Senator, and 100%. And that's one thing I wanted to emphasize is that this is, the federal government is the one that has the ability to go in and look at this. We don't, as the South Dakota Corn Growers Association, we don't as individual states. I think the federal government has the most power.
And you see that as beneficial to farmers, and it doesn't matter whether they're Republican farmers or Democratic farmers or independent farmers. They like to do the work they do. That's what they're about, right?
Correct, and all we ask for is just to purchase our inputs in a competitive market.
All right, and what about transparency? Mr. Chairman, why don't we pass the Thune bill? I mean, the transparency seems to be something all of you believe, including you, Mr. Rosentraut. The transparency is good. Anybody have a problem with us moving out and passing the Thune-Klobuchar bill? All right, good. I'd like us to do it, and right away. We've got to help these guys. Now, on small-scale farmers, it's really, really brutal as well. I mean, we're seeing consolidation among farmers as well, but that's not to drive profit. It's because the smaller farmers can't sustain themselves when they're losing this much per acre. Mr. Green, just talk to me about that. You know, I was on the Nitty Gritty farm in Charlotte, Vermont, 8th generation, and they've got 2 kids, hoping for the 9th generation. And by the way, all farmers I know, they just love the idea of passing that farm on to their kids. Tell me about that issue.
Well, the challenges that a lot of farmers and ranchers face, whether it be farmers in your state or farmers in other places, is no matter how big they are, they're still much smaller than the processors and the retailers that are downstream from them. And so their ability to negotiate fair prices is very limited.
Right.
And they're price takers. And in fact, some of the processors themselves are price takers versus the retailers. And so we've got a system where the consumer is paying more, the farmer is getting less, and the folks in the middle are, getting the benefits of all the hard work that are being done. So that's where the focus needs to be.
And I want to go back to this. I believe the Iran war is not me believing it. It's incontestable that it's raised prices. Diesel is way up, and that's a big use on the farm. Fertilizer is way up. But what I've heard from you is that has intensified what is a pre-existing problem with the consolidation, the high prices, and the really tight margins that our farmers are facing. Is that correct? All right.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Sir.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you for your persistence and advocacy on behalf of the people that are close and near and dear to you. And rural America is really critical to the well-being of all of America, Mr. Chairman. And I think we have to act. This Congress has to act. And, you know, you run a bipartisan committee, and everything I've heard from this affects farmers regardless of what their political affiliation is. So I hope we move that Thune bill and Klobuchar bill, and I hope we do everything we can on consolidation and transparency.
No, I hope we can act with this and several other things and get a farm bill passed.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Senator Moran.
Chairman, thank you. Please know that I join you in your efforts to combine maybe a few things, but get a farm bill done. Hugely important, another opportunity for us to provide some certainty to our farmers at home. Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony. I've been chairing my own subcommittee while this has been ongoing, but it's a hugely important issue. I've represented Kansas farmers and producers for a while. I see this as the most challenging time that my farmers in Kansas have faced since I've been a public official. It's in part due to 5 years of drought that's not over yet. And so we begin the financial circumstances of most farmers at home in very difficult circumstances without the financial capability to weather another storm. And so I'm very interested in trying to determine if there is a legislative fix to lots of market forces that go on that are bigger than just this one issue. Mr. Rosenbusch, I read your testimony and noted that you talked about rural fertilizer and fertilizer components. There's a science that goes into understanding fertilizer, which this hearing has helped me better understand. It's not just one component, it's related to so many other items that are necessary. But the closure of the Straits of Hormuz was probably not a circumstance that my farmers predicted and has a significant result related, as I understood your testimony, to the world's sulfur supply and 20% of the world's supply of liquefied natural gas. As sulfur is a key component of phosphate production, would it be fair to say that global phosphate access has been affected by the closure of the straits? That's true. Mr. Rosenbusch.
Yeah, Senator, thank you for that question. And I appreciate your understanding of the complexity of the markets, which is one of the reasons why we support transparency, because it is really difficult to track all of these different commodities in the markets for them. Without a doubt, sulfur is a big issue right now. We have the spot market trading as much as $1,300 a metric ton. And a lot of that is getting bought by Chinese for mining. When you look at copper, that might be $16,000 a metric ton to sell, that is where the free market is going to take a lot of that product as opposed to into fertilizer production. And so this is going to continue to be a challenging going into the 2027 crop year. It's a bit of a double-edged sword in that we need supply. We definitely support the idea of bringing more supply to the U.S. farmer. I was looking at some of the numbers. We have 108 companies that supply nitrogen to the United States. We have 38 companies that supply phosphorus to the United States, 16 companies that supply potash. And the double-edged sword is that you then expose yourself to some of these geopolitical events. And so we need to boast domestic production, but also find opportunities to continue to find reliable global sources.
One of the things, go down this path, one of the things that would be useful, I suppose, in theory, is a tariff to encourage domestic production. But a tariff also then increases the price of the inputs. And have we seen any increase in domestic production?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, Senator. I appreciate you raising what is a very challenging topic because long term, when you start to put non-free market measures in place from a policy perspective, we understand that that's going to actually have a worse consequence on supply for the United States. We saw that just with Venezuela recently, where we now have opened up that market, but that product is going to go to wherever the farmer is going to pay the most, which is Brazil right now. So if we artificially impact the U.S. market, we're not going to be able to attract supply here in the future.
Why are we being outcompeted? Why is somebody else more capable of paying the higher price?
That's a good question, Senator. It's one, because you have foreign governments that are driving up the price of that through subsidies. I just heard recently Ethiopia is bidding for a very limited supply right now, and India is paying nearly $1,000 a metric ton that they subsidize to farmers. So there's your floor price. That sets the global market price right there.
So while I focused a moment on tariffs, there's also this other distortion of moral markets in which foreign governments are subsidizing their farmers in a way that then disadvantages U.S. farmers.
And that's going to attract global supply at that particular price to those foreign suppliers we need as well.
If the straits were open tomorrow, what would happen?
Obviously, you're going to see an impact, and we need those vessels that are behind the strait to come. I think it's going to take a while for that market to work itself out because, as I mentioned in my testimony, 40 plants there have been either curtailed because of no natural gas or they were hit by missiles or drones.
Understand. Thank you all very much.
Senator Justice.
Well, y'all waited a long time to hear from me, haven't you? You'll find me to be this guy. I'll be the guy that, with logic and reason, and I appreciate our chairman like you can't imagine. I appreciate all these great committee members right here, and they do a great job. They really do. There's a real problem here, and I've heard lots and lots and lots of stuff from lots of people here just today, and they say things like, what do we do to get fertilizer prices down? Is the Iranian war killing farmers? Plenty of dollars in ag, but farmers aren't getting those dollars. You know, Trent Kubik says many things, but the one thing that absolutely just beams from him is he loves what he's doing, and he doesn't want to give it up. You know, I started our farming operation 50 years ago. And we grew it. At one point in time, we were the biggest cash grain farmers, I think, east of the Mississippi River. We were 7 or 8 times national corn growers. And, you know, Trent, I know you're in the national corn growers and everything but we were 7 or 8 times national corn growers winners. I know a lot about this. I really do know a lot about it. And I'm a business guy. You know, I've got an MBA and I'm a business guy. And I would tell you just this. You have a colossal problem because you've got a lot of people here that would really like to help, but I don't know that they will. At the end of the day, you've got frustration, and to be perfectly honest, it's probably going to get worse. We have to move. And Mr. Chairman, you know, and I know too, that we have to move. We're losing folks every day. And the tragedy is beyond teetotal belief. You know, I think about Eddie Melton there, and I've known him forever and a day, at least known of him forever and a day. And now I'm getting the opportunity to meet him and everything. And Eddie, I would say to you just this, did you ever know Ken Wells, Dr. Kenneth Wells at the University of Kentucky? Now, Dr. Kenneth Wells came to our operation when I was just a kid, and really basically I owe just almost everything I know about agriculture, and it's a boat full, to Kenneth Wells. You know, there's so much goodness in this room, it is unfathomable. But when you think about, you know, questions of, well, does the fertilizer industry really want transparency? Are you kidding me? Really? Do we really believe that? Sure, that's easy for us to say, but do we really believe? I mean, what we have here is a monopoly. We do. I mean, if we look back at ag prices, just think just a second about this. In 2022, not very far ago, you know, corn prices were $7. Today, at harvest time this past year, they probably drifted significantly into the $3 and something price. Do you realize that when Harry Truman was the president of this country, corn prices were $2.50? Go back and look. Think about it. How in the world can we possibly not act? We have got to move now, or we're going to awaken to an agriculture industry that is so different than we have could ever think, and it'll be bad. It'll be bad for all of us. We have got to do something right this minute. Now, I don't know exactly what all the answers are, but there's all kinds of combinations of lots and lots and lots of things. And it can be done. It can really be done. But absolutely, we've got to move, and move today. You know, from the standpoint of fertilizer prices, it's the most bewildering thing in the world. But just think about this. I'm from a state that abounds in coal as well. Metallurgical coal, and it is forevermore just this. You let metallurgical coal go from $100 a ton at the mine site to $200 a ton. Instantaneously, freight cost will go from $30 a ton to $53 a ton. Then if the price goes from there from $200 to $300, the freight cost will go from $53 to $61 a ton. And nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. It's all up to us. It's all up to all of us on this committee. It's all up to us as legislators to do something, because these people are really hurting. And it's time right now. Mr. Chairman, I know how much you love these people, and I plead with you, some way, somehow, we've got to solve the riddle, because they're really important. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Justice, and very well said. Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Green, last week I was lucky enough to engage with some of the agricultural leaders across Ventura County. These fresh produce growers shared a bit about their challenges being squeezed by retailers, whether that's not being able to sell into grocery stores because imported produce is cheaper, receiving the same cut even when the input prices change, or essentially subsidizing the remainder of products sold by retailers. Can you elaborate on how specialty crop specialty crop growers suffer when buyers abuse their market power, especially in a consolidated retail market?
Thank you, Senator. You've raised a very big challenge, which is there are dominant power buyers in the retail space that can exercise their power upstream to the farmer, no matter how fabulous the product they are raising, they do not have the opportunity to meaningfully negotiate when there's so few choices of where they can bring their product, and when the largest power buyers have the footprint in the market, so that if they go someplace else, or if they go to USDA and say, can you please inspect, instead of giving me, dinging me for, without documentation for not delivering certain amounts or things, or when they change contract terms, these are longer term contracts. Well, if the price goes up, the power buyer keeps the same low price. If the price goes down, suddenly the farmer has to eat that price drop. Same thing around financing terms that are getting longer and longer. The farmer is floating the retail power buyers a no interest rate loan. So it's real evidence that there are market power problems in the market you refer to. There are probably violations of the Perishable Agricultural Commodities Act as well. And it's the same type of thing we see in other sectors of this imbalance of market power that requires USDA, DOJ, FTC, and government to help balance those situations.
And in some of those mass retailers, isn't the produce section really the profit driver for most of the store?
I don't know that per se, but I think it's one thing that pulls people into the door. Yeah. And so when it's pulling people in the door and it's the most attractive part of the store, that's something that's really important. And so making sure that the farmer is sharing in the benefits is precisely why there are rules around making sure that volume discounts are available to every retailer, making sure that the price, that when a product comes, there's a USDA inspector that can make sure that the farmer is protected against being dinged without documentation by the retailer, et cetera.
You mentioned that some of these practices might violate a certain statute. Can you explain that?
So the Perishable Agricultural Commodities Act goes back to 1935, I think. It prohibits unfair, deceptive practices. It's similar to the Packers and Stockyards Act. It's similar to certainly the Federal Trade Commission Act. And it basically says if you're doing business, you've got to do business in a fair way, transparent way. These are well-established principles, and the USDA has enforced it for a very long time. I do worry about staffing at the Agricultural Marketing Service and other places, but it's a very important statute for the efficiency and competitiveness of the specialty crop industry.
Any other ideas you can share about how to equalize even a little the incredible disparity between the market power of these mass retailers and farmers?
You got to rein in the market power of the retailers. It's one of the reasons why the Robinson-Patman Act sets prohibitions against discriminatory, predatory, and other types of pricing differences, so that you can have a competitive retail sector, so that the dominant power buyer is not able to be so dominant that the farmer doesn't have a choice. If there's a competitive retail market and a retailer is not playing fairly, they can go someplace else and sell their product. If you don't deal with the concentration of power at the retail level, it's going to flow up to the farmer.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Slotkin.
I apologize for being late. I had another hearing that just finished up. Sorry, gentlemen, and I know you've gone through a lot of this. If you're getting me, you're at the very end, so you can rest easy. I have a question. I come from Michigan, so specialty crop state. Obviously, we do have row crops, but specialty crops are what we specialize in. And that tends to be small and medium-sized farms. We're not the mega farms of some other states. So I was actually hoping to ask a question of Mr. Melton, and I'm having trouble. There you go. Just Can you talk about what the pinch on fertilizer is really doing, particularly in your state, to some of the specialty croppers? You know, the food or the fruit and vegetable folks. I feel like they're already on their heels because of all the uncertainty going on in ag generally, and they're smaller. But can you talk to me about what you're seeing in Kentucky?
Sure, Senator, thank you. And, you know, we all know what fertilizer is. It's plant food. So I don't care if you're growing specialty crops, if you're growing row crops, if you're growing forage for your livestock animals, fertilizer is an important key to that. And when you bring it down to that level, that is what we all are dealing with right now. So is the cost of those fertilizers. So in our specialty crop markets, it is very much noted it is affecting them on their farms, just like it is all the other aspects of when we're purchasing fertilizer.
Yeah, it feels like there are so many variables in ag right now. I mean, obviously the weather you can't control, but there are all these other factors that are just making it really hard for small and medium-sized farmers, at least in my state, to keep farming. I mean, I think there's real existential questions going on for folks. And I live on my family farm. I lease the land out to a soybean farmer, and so I see those things very clearly. And does anyone on the panel have a sense, you know, we have this choke point right now in the Persian Gulf, traffic isn't getting back and forth. Let's say, you know, the Persian Gulf opened up tomorrow. How long do we understand it would be until that fertilizer actually gets through, comes back to the United States, and we can see this market regulating? Do we have, and I know the oil and gas people say it'll be a year even if the Straits of Hormuz open up today. Does anyone have a sense on fertilizer? I see, sir, go ahead, please.
I guess that's my question, Senator Slack, and thank you for the question. Thank you for your knowledge of potash, too. You've become
I'm a big
the
fan of
expert of potash, so we appreciate all you do there. Yeah, it's going to, once the strait is open, it would obviously take, you know, a good month for those vessels to clear and to get to the market destinations. What is still unclear is what the damage has been to those manufacturing sites in that region. We estimate there's about 40 plants that have been shuttered or closed down because either they no longer can produce or they were actually damaged because of the conflict. So it could be months or it could be years for those plants to come back online.
Can we stay on potash for just 1 second? Because, you know, look, we have discovered potash in Michigan. We're very excited about it. I'm supportive of us mining that potash. And I think, what do you see as the challenge of getting that off the ground? And I don't know, again, if there's others who also want to answer that. We know, you know, I'm a big believer in permitting reform and making it easier to make good economic decisions that affect economic security and national security. I think having access to critical minerals is part of that. Tell me what the constraints and the situation is.
Yeah, I would say that, as you know, we need our farmers to have as much supply as possible so they can be successful. Permitting is a huge issue, takes decades to get these mines up and running. Capital is a huge challenge as well. When you're talking about billions of dollars of capital that it takes to run, then the return that's required, that's another issue. I'm sure Mr. Westling can comment a little bit from a nitrogen perspective. And really it's permitting and capital that are probably the two biggest challenges.
Yeah, I'm a big believer. I mean, again, the answer can be no when you're asking for a permit. It just shouldn't take 15 years to get a yes or no, right? Just get to like decision faster.
And certainty. If people are putting the investment into these facilities in 5 years, what's the market going to look like? And can you still justify it?
I think that's fair. I don't want to abuse my time, Mr. Chairman, but I see there's other folks on the panel, if it's okay to just finish up.
I just want to add, Senator, that you also need a competitive market. If you want to talk about getting new fertilizer, if the market is constrained and is shut and the dominant powers are going to ice anybody that enters it by lowering the price or squeezing them, there's real no incentive to invest. And there have been a series of mergers that go back to 2010, 2013, 2015, 2018. All of those mergers can be reviewed by the FTC and the Department of Justice. Under a retrospective review, they can all be undone. And the price of fertilizer, even if the Straits of Hormuz opened back up, we saw the price of fertilizer in 2022 drop back, but not basically to where it was prior to the Ukraine war. It has stayed high. And so the issue of these long-standing trends towards concentration show that the underlying competitive dynamics in the market really do need to be addressed.
Great. Thank you, Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you. I just got a couple of things since I gave my time away to Senator Thune. We talked a lot about transparency today and access to more information. I guess the question I'd have from you, Mr. Kubik and Mr. Melton as producers, what information do you have access to that helps you better understand the input markets, and what additional information would be helpful? You got anything specific that we can actually sink our teeth into?
Yeah, I think, thank you, Senator, for that question. I think right now, again, I'd said before, a lot of our information comes through our retailers and the information they're getting from their
Can you
wholesalers.
understand it?
Somewhat, a little bit. It's hard to fathom how corn price can be here and fertilizer price can be here. Even when corn was here, fertilizer was here. So it's hard to understand it.
Sometimes it's so complex too that
yeah,
there's so much information.
Yeah, I just think if we can see, ports of where fertilizer is coming from, like for us, Minneapolis, Sioux City, NOLA down in the Gulf, just to kind of get our heads wrapped around where that market's at, and then just see the margin built in, see what the supply chain is like from manufacturer to processor to distributor to retail. Like I said, just to help us plan and mitigate our risk a little bit more.
Senator, I think that we know the demand's there. We've talked about that several times today. I think knowing what the supply is that we're dealing with ahead of time. What's the supply going to be moving forward? Because that's what basic economics is. It's supply and demand, and it sets price. But if we don't know what the supply is, and we know the demand's there, and the supply changes all the time on us. So if we had some way to know and predict kind of what the supply is moving forward, I think, and we have access to that information, I think it helps me as a producer, and I think it would help Trent too, knowing where that supply is and if we're going to be able to get it when we need it.
Thank you. Mr. Westling, you're in the process of building your new facility in Nebraska. Give us a thing, like I say, you're experiencing this. Give us a thing that Congress or the administration could do to spur increased domestic fertilizer production. What would have helped you?
Well, I think the FPEP program, thank you for the question, Senator. I think the FPEP program had the construct was good, and what it wanted to do and incentivizing these types of projects was a good thing, and ultimately could be distributed in a way that could have a big impact on bringing more of these to the marketplace. I don't think there are 20 or 30 projects that need to be built. I think it's a handful in places to augment the larger production, but bringing dollars to those projects would absolutely be impactful.
Very good. And finally, and then we're going to give you all a break. We've seen what military conflict, trade disputes, all that's going on in the world right now. We live in a dangerous world. And this is for anybody who just wants to jump in. What else should we be doing to reduce our exposure to foreign disruptions? We've seen what blocking the strait has done. This is national security. Do we need to consider, like we have an oil reserve, do we need some sort of a reserve of fertilizer? Has anybody got any ideas?
Well,
go ahead. I want to underscore the importance of seeds here, where seed resiliency and the seed bank at the National Plant Germplasm System is really a national security resource, so that we have the genetics to be able to adapt to regional varieties and the research and the access. The Department of Justice filed just yesterday a very important statement in a private case around the ability to read the genetics. And so I think fertilizer has to be thought of in context of these other tools that can keep us nimble, flexible, resilient, and self-reliant really across these markets.
Yes, Senator, thank you for that question. We've talked a lot about strategic reserves recently, and fertilizer is very different than oil and gas. It would be an honor to take you to some of these massive facilities and warehouses where some of these products are stored, and you'll see the capital and complexity of how large these facilities are. But fertilizer itself as well, if kept for a long period of time, the quality can deteriorate fast. You get clumping. You start to see it really kind of form a big old block of concrete. So it's not something that can be stored for long periods of time. So the answer is let's bolster our domestic supply with projects like Mr. Westling.
Very good.
And I would add to that just simply by saying, make the stuff where you use the stuff.
Great. Thank you all very much. This has really been a good discussion. I think everybody on the panel has learned a great deal as a result of it. As you can see, this committee is very serious and really does just a good job. We've got a great group of members on both sides that work hard, as was mentioned. Agriculture, farmers are not about Republican farmers or Democrat farmers or Republican small towns or Democrat small towns. This is about trying to help out and trying to stabilize just a tremendous asset of this country. With that, again, thank you for being here. The record will remain open for 5 business days, and we are adjourned.